welcome to the Wandering Creatives podcast. I'm your host, Allie, and joining me for today's episode is Annie Petsche. Annie is a career and fulfillment coach that assists clients with designing a fulfilling career that unlocks and feeds their creativity and unique genius. So thank you so much for joining me, Annie. I am beyond excited to have you on the podcast today to discuss how people can design careers around their creativity and their passion. And I just cannot wait to discuss this topic with you because I feel like it's something that a lot of creative folks struggle with, kind of feeling stuck in their jobs, not passionate about what they're doing. So I cannot wait to kind of hear from you and get some good tips for how to find that career that is a good fit for what you're passionate about. But before we jump into that, Annie, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Allie. Hi, I am Annie. And as you mentioned, I'm a career and fulfillment coach. I spent 13 years in the corporate world building really what I would consider a promising and abundant career. I had a lot of great opportunities and experienced success that I'm deeply grateful for. But throughout that entire 13 years, I heard a continuous voice in the back of my head telling me, this isn't it, Annie. This isn't sustainable for the next 30 to 40 years. And after a few major events occurred that caused some disappointment, I decided I needed to heed that voice. So I got crystal clear on what I'd rather be doing, strategized my roadmap, and designed a career to fit who I am and what I want. I really want to echo what you mentioned already about, people who feel stuck in an unfulfilling career, and just add on to that COVID has really, I feel like, expanded on how we're feeling and almost magnified those pockets of dissatisfaction or unfulfillment. So I have, a lot of clients, a lot of folks I'm engaged with who just feel like I'm ready to get honest with myself. Let's reprioritize. It's time.
Yeah, I love that you brought up COVID because I think, like you said, it's been an eye opener for a lot of folks. I think there are many that are like, oh, so my side hustle could maybe be my main hustle. I just got to figure out how to make that work. I'm curious how you got into fulfillment coaching. Was that something that came out of you learning how to design your own ideal career? As you mentioned, you have a background in consulting, you're a yoga teacher, and you're also a master certified life and health coach. And I also wonder, are those things that you were practicing or working towards prior to becoming a fulfillment coach? Or are they things that you've found you're more passionate about since becoming a fulfillment coach?
Ooh, great question. So yes, all of my experience, both personally and professionally, fed into my coaching career. I'm actually also a certified Ayurvedic health educator as well. So I've got a lot of irons in the fire that contributed to where I've landed. And I'm a multi-passionate human. I want to know it all, see it all, and experience it all. So when I firmly decided it was time to design my new career path, I knew I had to honor that part of who I am. I also knew it was one of my superpowers. So I landed on coaching through the process of understanding myself, my needs and my wants, my skills and expertise, and my passions. Ultimately, I defined my overarching why. And once I understood my why, the ability to crystallize my coaching path became clear. So to directly respond to whether I honed these passions after deciding I wanted to be a coach or before, it was before. Like I said, I'm multi-passionate. My interests are scattered all over the map. So this process of honing my career was really a process of honoring exactly who I am, exactly what I'm interested in, and just really crystallizing that vision of these are my values. This is what I want to embrace in my life.
That's got to be a really kind of amazing feeling to be able to pause and look back and say, oh, like I have all these pieces of things that I enjoy doing that I've been passionate about for however long. And then being able to piece them together and say, oh, well, yeah, it makes total sense now. Like I love all these things. And now I can create that one thing, that career that they all fit into. Like that has to be like such an amazing feeling to have, and to be able to move forward with it as a, for you as a fulfillment coach. I imagine that just has to be like such a freaking awesome experience.
Absolutely. I mean, once you gain that crystallization, it's like this big aha, like, oh my goodness, all these puzzle pieces actually fit together. For so long, I have felt confused and I felt the weight of my indecisions, when in reality, it wasn't indecision. It wasn't that I couldn't commit to anything. It's just that I wasn't aware of how I could really fruitfully pull together all of my, individualized, unique puzzle pieces.
I imagine sitting there and in hindsight being like, oh, like, yep, that led into this, which led into this, which equals this. And just like you said, having one of those aha moments and having it all fall into place is just absolutely amazing. I love that. Can you explain a little bit about what you do as a fulfillment coach?
Absolutely. So my inspiration to enter into career and fulfillment coaching was really myself, to be honest, my journey and what I went through. And in that process, I was like, there has to be other people that feel the same way I do, who feel like I have the ingredients. I know that I'm capable of creating something meaningful and immersing myself in work that I truly care about, but I just don't know the recipe yet. And I'm actually mirroring one of my clients with this quote. She said just the other week, I know I have all the ingredients. I know they're in there. I just don't know the recipe yet. And I thought that was so perfect and profound, because that's what it is. I mean, it's not that we're scattered all over the place without direction. It's just a matter of understanding who we are and how we fit ourselves together. So I work with ambitious, multi-passionate individuals who have built a career thus far that really looks great on paper, but they feel uninspired. So I help them design a career path rooted in who they are that fuels and fulfills them.
Something I absolutely love is that you believe in the power of flow, getting lost in creativity, and unlocking your unique genius, which I can't put into words how much I just love that sentence. Because I feel like it embodies a lot of what we struggle with. And I would just love to have you break it down a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. As you're talking through this, I'm inching to the edge of my chair and getting closer to my microphone, because I also feel just so strongly and so passionate and just so fueled by this idea of our unique genius. So I'll start by laying out that I view our unique genius to be that specific mix of skills, passion, expertise, and values that makes us uniquely us. So no one else possesses that unique constellation. And I wholeheartedly believe that when we honor our unique genius, we enable ourselves to perform at our personal best. That's when we're showing up in the flow. We are able to just channel our superpowers, our power. And the funny thing is, we tend to discount our unique genius because it doesn't feel labor intensive. So we kind of glaze over it as not an eligible form of quote unquote work to be compensated for. And I think that's where tapping into our unique genius can become really tricky. But the reality is, when you're engaging your unique genius, that's when you click into your creativity and flow. That's when ideas feel seamless and brilliant and exciting.
So you said oftentimes when people kind of like click into that unique genius vibe, I guess, or area within themselves, it doesn't feel like work. And so I guess in my mind, I'm wondering if that's why a lot of creatives have a hard time like marketing themselves and selling themselves, and like imposter syndrome and all of that. Like I'm kind of curious if is kind of related to, like you said, like tapping into that unique genius and feeling like it's not work. So if it's easier for you to do, how do you get compensation for it? Does that make any kind of sense?
Oh yeah. And that's 100% it. I mean, I work with a lot of creatives, and that is a major hurdle. That was a hurdle for me too, because, societal expectations, the unwritten societal expectations tell us that work has to feel a certain way. It either has to feel challenging or burdensome or this, that, and the other. So when we click into our unique genius and these ideas flow with ease, and we don't feel that weight, we don't feel that resistance, it could feel like, oh my goodness, well, is this worth being paid for? Can I actually charge for this? It just doesn't feel hard enough or labor intensive enough. And that's just not the reality. The reality is, when you're clicked in and it feels seamless, that's when you're creating the most value, the most impact.
I find it so interesting. Something else that you and I had kind of discussed before we started recording today was how people who consider themselves as like free range employees, or, I'm a jack of all trades, I can do a little bit of everything, that those are often the people that maybe are not as passionate about their work or are multi-passionate individuals. And so how can individuals with many interests or passions piece them together to create that comprehensive career and to tap into that unique genius? Do you have any tips, or, is there a way that you would recommend they start kind of working through that and putting it together?
Oh yeah. So I called myself a free range employee in the corporate world because I was constantly taking on opportunities that were far beyond the scope of my role. I couldn't sit still knowing that there were so many other opportunities to learn, create, and gather experience. And I think there's a difference between being uber passionate about one specific area of expertise and living with passion. So when you're multi-passionate, you want to infuse your passionate mode of being into everything you do. You just can't help it. But as wonderful as that is, when we think of an abundant, fulfilling career, I think it's imperative that we hone our wandering passions. So before we gain that clarity, I view it as all of our multi-passionate puzzle pieces kind of floating in the ether without a North Star to follow. But like I mentioned before, we can pull those puzzle pieces together to create a comprehensive vision of who we are and what we want by examining our skills, passions, expertise, and values.
So it's a lot about sitting down and saying, okay, these are the things that I'm good at or that I've done in the past, but which one of these things or, group of things did I really enjoy, and how can I piece them together and filter them through based on passion, I guess, maybe. And if that makes any type of sense.
Yeah. So I can use myself as an example. So I feel very strongly about identifying our why, our overarching mission, if you will. And I don't want to place this why on like a faraway pedestal that's like impossible to reach, that's elusive and we can't really fully understand. I really view our why as an accessible lens through which we can filter our energy. And what I mean by that is, so my personal why that I've distilled after, when I went through this process, it took many months for me to land here. But in its simplicity, my why is to optimize the human experience for myself and for others. So that sounds pretty broad, and it can sound pretty ambiguous probably from an onlooker's perspective, but I know what it means. I know, how multifaceted it is. So everything I do, every idea I have, every decision I make can be filtered through that why. So I can continuously ask the question, is this optimizing the human experience for myself? Is it optimizing it for others? How is it serving others? So that really acts as a guidepost for me and all of my multi-passionate interests. So when I take it down a level into coaching, that allows me to then understand, okay, as a coach, how can I contribute to the human experience? And how can I pull in all of my previous experience? So I pull in mindfulness and yoga and Ayurvedic healing and innovation and culture and employee experience into my coaching. So it's really very, very multifaceted, and it plays on all my passions, but all those passions are able to work together and funnel in the same direction.
Yeah, they all build together to contribute to your overarching mission or your why. I feel like that also helps with not having to pigeonhole yourself into one area, because you can do a lot of different things that still feed into the why. So you don't have to limit yourself to just coaching. Like you can look at other avenues in which to optimize the human experience. It doesn't just have to be coaching. And I like that because I feel like it gives you, again, that creative room to tap into the variety of things that you enjoy doing.
Yes, totally. I'm all about, if I had to summarize it in 2 words, I'm all about, actually, it would be impossible to summarize anything into 2 words. Let's be honest, just multi-passionate. But for the sake of this conversation, intentionality and optionality. So I want to be moving with intention in my career, but I also want to keep my options open. Who knows how I'm going to evolve? Who knows what I'm going to be interested in the future as I grow and as I learn. So I want to keep my options open for growth. But again, I always want to be moving and creating with intention.
This episode of the Wandering Creatives podcast is sponsored by Coots Creations, branding and marketing for creatives by creatives. Coots Creations serves small businesses, entrepreneurs, and creatives throughout the country with branding, marketing, and social media management. We accomplish this by creating unique graphics, a cohesive visual brand, and content that tells your brand's story and builds trust with your customers. Visit cootscreations.com and book your free consultation today.
So I want to move into a little bit of kind of an advice corner with Annie. What are some steps that people can start like making when they are feeling stuck and want to start moving? Maybe they're in a 9-to-5 that they're just in, and they want to start creating or finding that right career.
So I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible. I don't want to overwhelm. I know being multi-passionate by nature, when we start to think about what we want, can create overwhelm rather quickly. So I just want you to keep in mind, move slowly, move one step at a time, allow yourself space to understand. And a great starting point is to start by assessing who you are. Cultivate that deep sense of self-understanding and awareness. Like I mentioned, assess your skills, your passions, your expertise, and your values. And this is so important. I keep repeating it because we think we know ourselves, but when we're charged with verbalizing who we are, we then realized just how much we have to learn.
I imagine doing something like journal exercises maybe, or kind of like brainstorming sessions where you just kind of like word vomit out things and then like slowly pick through it and figure out, okay, so yeah, I've listed like 20 things that I really like doing, but when I look at them, how much do I really like doing them? And is it something that I would want to build a career on? And then whittling away until you can find the things that you really love. In my brain, that's how I would do this, I guess.
Yes. And you just highlighted 2 very, very important pieces of the process. So one is capturing everything in writing. When we allow our thoughts to just float around in the ether and our ideas, that's where they stay. It's very hard to take action when we can't see in front of us who we are and we can't start to actually tangibly pull the puzzle pieces together. So everything in writing. And another thing you kind of alluded to is cast a wide net. Don't just stop at whatever feels top of mind. Mind map. Do whatever you need to do. Brainstorm, brain dump, get all of your thoughts out there, because the wider of a net that you cast and the more information, data that you capture about yourself, the more capable you'll be of honing your vision.
What are some common mistakes that people make when they're trying to map out a career, especially when dealing with creatives?
Yeah. So let's bring forward a word that I feel like strikes a lot of fear in a lot of creatives' hearts, and that is niche.
Yes.
So I ran away from this word for a long time. And I'm not sure this is a mistake so much as a tripping point, but niching down for creatives can feel very tricky. It can cause us to feel like we're putting ourselves in a box. So I encourage anyone who feels resistant to defining a niche to reframe it. Your niche is an extension of your why, and it evolves as you evolve. It's not set in stone. And I think that's, again, one of the biggest tripping points is when we think about a niche, it's like, oh my goodness, I am putting myself in a corner for the rest of time. And I'm going to lose out on so many opportunities. I already have FOMO and I don't even know what the FOMO is about. So yes. It can really create a spiral. And to add on to that, when all of our puzzle pieces are scattered all over the place, we're not necessarily funneling our energy in a cohesive direction. So our opportunities to serve others can actually be thwarted when we operate in this mode of, oh, I'm multi-passionate and I have, all these flitting thoughts and interests and energy. So on the flip side, defining a niche that you align with opens up the door for possibilities. It doesn't close the door. And I really want to be crystal clear about that. Once you've defined your niche, again, your niche can be ever evolving. It grows as you grow. You can then pull all of your passions and interests into your work. So like I mentioned earlier, I am a coach and my niche is to work with multi-passionate individuals to design a fulfilling career. However, I pull in so many different interests and modalities into my practice that I don't feel limited in the slightest. I think one of the tricky things, and I know I mentioned that I view being multi-passionate as a superpower. Mm-hmm. I also view it as if we're not utilizing that superpower in a way that serves us, it can tip over into being our kryptonite. I think that's the opposite of a superpower. So, and I mean that in the sense that when we're multi-passionate, we feel like I want to do so many different things. I have so many different interests. I'm also capable of doing a lot of things and figuring a lot of things out. And if we're not careful, our ego can really swoop in and take over. So when we start to think about, okay, here's my niche, but I also want to do that. Oh, and I want to do that too. And I can definitely do that as well. And we start pulling in more and more pebbles until it's more pebbles than we can handle. And I truly think that's part of our ego swooping in to say, well, I can do it all. I'm totally capable of doing it all. And maybe you are, but that's not going to translate outward to your audience and to your clients.
That's really good advice. Do you have any final words of advice or encouragement for our listeners today?
Yeah. So as rewarding as it is to pull all of your multi-passionate puzzle pieces together, the process, like I mentioned, can get overwhelming. It can feel like, oh my goodness, what have I embarked on? So I really just want to highlight that designing a fulfilling career is not a one-time commitment. It requires you to recommit every single day, and it will likely look and feel messy while you're in the discovery phase, but trust that you are making progress and continue making that commitment to yourself.
Really good advice. I think sometimes we feel like we have to figure it out right now, and that's what we got to stick with for the rest of our lives. And that in itself can be really overwhelming. Like, I have to make the right choice because this is it. This is what I'm going to do. So yeah, kind of reminding yourself that like it's an iterative process, essentially, right? Like this isn't what you're not stuck with it for the rest of your life. Like you can grow and transform over time.
Yes, absolutely. Iterative is the perfect word for it. And understanding and having patience with ourselves. I think one of the greatest double-edged swords that we create for ourselves as humans is that we inherently want instant results, and we also inherently want the path of least resistance. So wanting those two things simultaneously it goes against this process of having patience and doing the deep work to understand how those puzzle pieces fit together. And we can become very impatient. So instant results, not likely. Path of least resistance, it's not, but it's highly rewarding and it is so, so, so worth it.
Oh my gosh. Annie, so as we start to wrap up, I'd love to know, like, what are you currently working on? Do you have anything you'd like to share with our listeners?
I'm actually in the process of creating a digital course that I am extremely excited about. I don't want to say too much yet, but it will be rooted in a lot of what we discussed today. And it utilizes findings from working with many of my one-on-one clients and all of my, consulting experience, my coaching education. It'll really be a culmination of all of my multi-passionate puzzle pieces, we could say.
Where can folks find you online?
Yeah, so TikTok is a great place to engage. My TikTok handle is at Coach_Annie Petsche. And there's also an opportunity to apply for a consult call with me through my website if you're interested in one-on-one coaching.
Awesome. Yeah, I actually found you on TikTok. I saw one of your TikToks and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to talk to this person. And I'm so happy that we were able to connect because it's been just absolutely amazing getting to know you and having you on the podcast. I can't thank you enough for being on and for sharing such great information and so many amazing tips. I can't thank you enough.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
As Annie mentioned, you can find her on TikTok at Coach_Annie Petsche. And she's also on Instagram. And you can also find her at her website, www.anniepetsche.com. Again, Annie, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been amazing having you on the podcast. And I'd also like to thank you, the listeners, for tuning in to today's episode. If you have questions, comments for me or for any of my guests, you can text or call us on our hotline, 252-419-6004. Leave us a message and we will answer your questions on a future episode of the podcast. Be sure to like, rate, and review the podcast. It helps us out tremendously. And you can also follow us on Instagram at wandering_creative_ and visit our website, cootscreations.com.
This has been a Coots Creations production. Follow the show on Instagram at wandering_creative_ and on Twitter at wandering_pod. For more information, go to cootscreations.com. Like, rate, review, and subscribe. To sponsor the Wandering Creatives podcast, visit www.cootscreations.com/podcast-sponsorship-opportunities. You can also click the link in the episode description below. To be a guest or a featured maker on the podcast, click the link in our Instagram bio or contact us at cootscreationsllc@gmail.com.